Time to elevate. You're running on empty with Matt and Tony.
Hey, everybody, welcome to Running on Empty. I'm Matt.
And I'm Tony.
And we're running on empty. And we've been off a little bit, but we're back and excited to be back into the interview game here. Tony, why don't you tell us what we got going on this episode?
Yeah, we've got a really good one today. We're going to talk about the state of the Wisconsin economy, and so much of what's going on in the Wisconsin economy is going on nationally also. And we're joined by someone that I've admired for a long time in Wisconsin, and her name is Laura Dresser. Welcome, Laura.
Thanks for having me.
Right. You're welcome. Let me say a little bit about Laura. She is a clinical assistant professor in the Sandra Rosenbaum School of Social Work at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. She is also the associate director of the Center on Wisconsin Strategy, or COWS, a UW-Madison think and do tank, where she has worked for more than 2 decades. Her research and practice has focused on low-wage work and workforce development systems. She has analyzed the structure of low-wage jobs, written about ways to build stronger labor market systems, and worked extensively with labor, business, and community leaders to build them. A co-editor of The Gloves Off Economy, Workplace Standards at the Bottom of America's Labor Market, she is currently working on issues of care work and the connection between quality care, quality jobs, and minimum wages. Dr. Dresser earned her bachelor's degree at Rice University and Masters of Social Work and doctorate degrees at the University of Michigan. Thanks again so much for being here, Laura. We greatly appreciate it.
I'm glad to be here.
Absolutely. And I've been following COWS, or the Center on Wisconsin Strategy, for quite a while. And pretty much every year you folks put out the State of Working Wisconsin report, which is, very rigorous and a thorough look at the economy. And one thing that drew me to it originally was that COWS talks about the difference between a high road economy and a low road economy. Can you draw that distinction for us?
Yeah, definitely. I think this is a distinction that's often not very well drawn, especially in the US, where we just act like the economy is what we is kind of natural and we just get what we get. But one of the deep observations about COWS and the work that we've done is to try and say there are different ways, even under competitive market conditions, there are different ways to make money, to connect people, to build a society. And the high road is both about firm operations, so that you can look at firms. And a classic contrast is between Costco and Walmart. Because in the same industry, Costco does way fewer part-time jobs. It does way more full-time jobs. It offers benefits for the retail work. It offers steadier schedules and higher wages. They have designed something that works way better for workers.
Yeah.
Than Walmart. So that's like one. So you can see it at the firm level, but you can also see it at the societal level, where you are making choices consistently to emphasize wage standards, environmental standards, community standards, and the democratic input that allows that to happen. Lots of societies are run more in that direction. Wisconsin, unfortunately, I think has gotten more and more low road, even in the 25 years I've lived here.
Oh. So when you say Wisconsin has gotten more low road, flesh that out for us. Is it like the rate of union participation has gone down?
I mean, unions, I was going to point to unions first, right? Like, so unions are a part of building a more equitable society, and unions work for their members. Like, we know this. Union members make more than similar workers that don't have union representation. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the first and only thing we tend to think about unions, that they operate in the narrow member interest. Right. But unions operate in the general worker interest in 2 ways. One is if they get enough density in a sector, that is, if they represent enough work sites that they can really establish the wage floor, non-union firms follow that floor. You can see this in hotel housekeeping in Las Vegas. The union has enough properties to really bring the floor up, because those non-union places, they don't want to get unionized and they have to compete for employees. And so both of those things are pushing the wages up because of the union contract for workers outside of the union contract. So that's one way that, the unions actually are an institution that pulls together, pulls wages up.
Exactly.
And then they work politically, right? Who defends the Affordable Care Act? Who works to raise the minimum wage? Unions are a political force, and those are in the interest of working people. And so that's another way. And of course, the story of Wisconsin is moving away from unions over the last 10 years, especially.
Absolutely. You mentioned minimum wage. Wisconsin is stuck at the federal minimum wage, which is, I guess, what is it, $7.25?
That's correct.
All right. So this is also part of our low road economy, correct?
Exactly. That's
Right.
Another institution that is a choice, and is a subject of state law. If it would be great for the feds to raise the minimum wage. But our neighbors, Minnesota, Illinois, Michigan, all off the 725 have chosen higher minimum wages. Just, I think 20 states, last I checked, are still at the federal 725. Some are indexing their minimum wage, so it just keeps up with inflation instead of sitting, at some weird, increasingly irrelevant floor. But so the minimum wage is another institution that Wisconsin's making a different choice on.
See, in Colorado here, minimum wage is $12.32 an hour. But you see a lot of businesses, that's what they're offering. They're not offering any more than that. How do we fix that?
Wow, so this is that's harder. One thing is you need institutions that raise standards on work. Yeah. And then another thing is you need to I think one of the things that's happening even in Wisconsin right now, the 725 is not really relevant. Service labor markets are so tight that I think we're seeing a lot of moves well above the minimum, obviously, and even to 10, 11. I think that workers have sort of woken up. A lot of workers sort of got called essential in this period, but didn't get treated with the kind of structures that makes essential work possible in a sustainable way. And so I think we're seeing actually workers, you see some organizing through union strategies, but you also see workers just saying, you know what, that's not going to work for me. I need real steady hours. I need a better wage. I need health insurance from my work. I'm in a global pandemic. Right.
Tipping is such an American construct. That would be one thing to be great to get out of that mindset. Here's $4 an hour, $3 an hour plus tips. How about $20 an hour? And like tipping is completely optional. Like if you really did a great job, we'll tip you. Because if for me personally, if somebody does a great job, I'll tip whether it's required or not. But that's what I would like to see is trying to get out of the mindset of this tipping economy, because it's old school. I personally,
and it is really, I think that right now it's 213 plus tips. Technically, tips have to, in the state of Wisconsin, it's different all over the place. But technically, the tips have to get you to the minimum wage, or you could demand that from the employer. But everybody knows that nobody does that, right? Nobody really demands the minimum. But states like, Washington State, there is no tip minimum anymore. Okay. Every service worker is at the minimum, and then it's tips on top of that. We're still on a kind of very tipped up based economy. In Australia, for example, like think about, Australia. I saw some research that basically at a fast food place, you earn more than $20 an hour.
Wow.
Yeah. Like we just think that's impossible. It's not impossible.
Not at all.
Jobs could pay more money, and they probably pay a little bit more for hamburgers, and they probably eat in a little bit more than we do. I bet that's true too. But the workers in those jobs have decent lives.
Yeah,
right. Absolutely.
In 2019, my wife and I visited Ireland, And our friend Robert said, now when we go out to a restaurant, he said, you don't need to tip. And I said, why? He says, these people are actually paid really well compared to the way your servers are paid over in the States. And so we had a little discussion at dinner. We had this, gorgeous steak dinner. And it wasn't, because we had a large group, it wasn't the added 20%. I'm like, wow, this is like so different. And nothing was diminished. They still offered great service. I mean, they're still doing stuff. And he said, if you felt that they went above and beyond what they, would normally do, then you can leave one. But it's totally not required. And I'm like, wow, I really, let me tell you, we saved a lot of money when we went on vacation.
Well, and I think that's one of the observations back to this question about the high road and the low road is I think in the US, because of the way we we're very narrow in or parochial in the way we view things. And getting out of the country, you can realize there's a lot of different sort of things that get called capitalism, right? And they do very different things for workers, especially different levels of toleration for inequality. And what I think the US is really defined by, labor markets here is really defined by an embrace of inequality and a kind of conception that individuals' choices are what is determining the quality of their jobs, when it's so much more related to institutions and kind of a capacity, a need to regulate more and to really demand something from work.
Right. So you said, Laura, that in your 25 plus years in Wisconsin, you've seen our state go closer and closer to keep moving more low road. So then we hit the pandemic. So when the pandemic hit in 2020 in essentially a low road economy, what was the consequences for that? How bad was the pandemic for Wisconsin's economy?
I mean, I think what the pandemic really does, it seems to me, is crystallize, expose, and exacerbate a series of longstanding trends that are where the brutal inequalities of the Wisconsin economy are located. And so what do I mean by that? I mean, we come into the pandemic with some of the worst Black-white racial disparity in the nation. And that's because Wisconsin systems deliver results for white people in the state that are slightly above national averages. Wisconsin systems deliver results and that are well below national averages for Black people in this state. And when I say systems deliver results, I'm talking about the public schools, but also I'm talking about the employment system in this state, which delivers unemployment rates, very high unemployment rates, very low, very high wage disparity vis-a-vis whites, home ownership, infant mortality, again and again and again. We come into so Black-white disparity, and then also this preponderance of low-wage jobs is this issue that, I've been watching for 20 years. A lot of people have been talking about, but you come in and then you drop a pandemic that instead of concentrating the hurt of the shutdown on manufacturing and construction workers, who at least tend to have systems that know that their jobs are cyclical, right? Yeah. You drop this pandemic, the hurt of it, the economic shutdown of it on the people who work in the places we gather, right? So restaurants, bars, entertainment industry, hotels, that's where the disemployment lands. And those are workers that are already at the lowest wages, already don't have access to health insurance, already have unstable hours, and don't have a lot of money sitting around to help them get through. So that's what I think happens in the pandemic, is you see this, all these disparities land again in the pandemic.
And see, what's so interesting, Laura, is that I hear so many people say we need to get back to the pre-pandemic norm.
Yeah.
But from listening to you, I get the feeling the pre-pandemic norm wasn't that great, was it?
I mean, for certain people, right, the pre-pandemic norm kind of worked. And for certain people, and I include myself here, right? Look at me in the pandemic. I get my full, across the year, where we were all living under a rock. I get my full paycheck. I get to be safe online.
Yep.
I get to keep doing my work from my house, right? So I come through pretty, like it's a drag.
Yep.
I'm kind of tired of Zoom calls.
Yeah.
But like every privilege. And then but folks, at the bottom lose their jobs or are exposed in their jobs.
Mhm.
And hopefully things have changed, I think, across the summer, not as much as we wish they would have changed, but the normal that we tolerated before was unsustainable for the people who suffered most during this pandemic. And that's what I think we really need to see different is how do we use what we learned in the last year to reimagine what's possible in service work.
Mm-hmm.
One of the
Go
things
ahead,
with the pandemic that not counting the virus itself, but the whole idea of the pandemic really exposed a lot of what was wrong, which the virus, I mean, think about it. It's a metaphor for the actual virus, which the reason the virus is so dangerous is you don't know what it's going to do to you. You might have something wrong that you don't know about, and this virus goes crazy. We lost a friend who had a tooth infection and got COVID, and the virus got a hold of the tooth infection, and essentially his entire body had a tooth infection and killed him. So you don't know what this thing's going to do, much like we all thought it was fine. Like you're saying, we think, the economy's fine, but now this thing happens and you realize where all these cracks lie. So I think this is a great eye opener that allows us to at least, approach some of these things and work on some of the issues that we didn't even know we had.
Yeah. One that's like that to me is just to have an entire health insurance system basically built around the idea of your health insurance coming from your job.
Right.
And then to lose 500,000 jobs, or, I can't remember the national numbers, huge job loss, 5% job loss. That's lost health insurance into a pandemic, right?
Yeah.
That's just,
you
got to rethink that.
It makes no sense to tie health insurance to a job, especially after this, because people still needed the insurance, but didn't have the jobs. I mean, I'm in entertainment. I shut down for a year and a half. It was not fun, very grateful to be back, but no, I get it.
Laura, in Wisconsin, the Republican legislature has spent really the entire COVID period more concerned with defeating COVID mitigation efforts than doing anything relating to the economy and fixing it or whatnot. If we had a legislature that was serious about addressing some of the issues that your organization raises, what would a serious legislature be doing?
Well, I mean, I think I really credit and look to what the federal government has done across. I mean, I think that has made it an enormous, just the census data this week about poverty going down because the federal government saw these needs in the unemployment for people like in the entertainment industry who've never been able to get unemployment before. And how do we build a system that responds to that need that we see? So a lot of great things happen at the federal level. Mm-hmm. I think, the state, and here I'm going to ask for some not radical things. Like there is an interest in updating our UI system. Yeah. And it would take a real investment, and that we can't pull that off is like kind of really depressing. I mean, I would like other things, right? More than that, I would like Medicaid expanded. I would like the state to take on covering more people for health insurance. I'd like to see more thinking about labor standards and how to support our best employers in getting the employees they need, and how to help, workers who still can't work because of health issues or because of lack of demand. We're still below where we were in February 2020. Then, what do we do about that? That'd be more interesting to me.
Well, in Wisconsin, Act 10 has now been on the books, I guess, since 2011, right? That's the one that, essentially busted state unions. Many other consequences of it. And of course, the Republican leadership insists that it was the best thing that the state ever did. Democratic leadership says, of course, not. Your group is nonpartisan. Just from an objective perspective, what objectively, what can we say about what Act 10 did and how it either hurt or helped us through this period?
Well, if you think of Act 10 as an act that was intended to deunionize the public sector in this state, Act 10 was very effective at what it did. If you remember, however, that Act 10 was couched as a necessary reform in order to make the state competitive, to make the state economy grow.
Right.
I think the evidence there is much more thin. Wisconsin's recovery from 2010 was always weaker than the national average. Weaker, that is, the job production was weaker, less robust than neighboring states, than the national average. So Act 10 didn't deliver that for us. And I think also we see real issues in the ability to attract and retain teachers, which and the morale of teachers, which I think has everything to do with Act 10 and putting a target on public sector workers back in such a kind of political way. So, I would say if you meant to deunionize the state with the act, that's part, it made the terms of public sector unionization very difficult. It all but busts the unions, right? And then in 2015, they passed Right to Work, which changes the terms of private sector unionization in the state. And both of these things, I think are based on a theory that what we want is more jobs, any jobs, Foxconn jobs, not, we need to think about job quality, because jobs that don't sustain lives are not worth, getting. And in fact, Wisconsin didn't even do that well on job growth overall.
Laura, can you explain to people what Right to Work means? Because it's kind of like one of those healthy forest initiative kind of deals, right? where the healthy forest initiative is actually going to kill the forest. What does the Right to Work actually do?
It's such a brilliant marketing, and it's hard to get around. I have a friend who always says Right to Work for less.
Okay.
Is one way that you can kind of frame it. But Right to Work, and they're smart to. It was a very smart name, because then once I start talking about the details of it, everybody's going to glaze over. But the bottom line on it is that unions, usually when unions represent workers, they represent all the workers. And you have to pay in because you're benefiting, even if you're not super psyched about being a union member, right? And in Right to Work, you get the choice of whether you're going to pay in or not. And this just completely changes how unions operate, how they get membership, how they bargain. And it sounds like a fair deal, except it misunderstands what collective action makes possible. And I think this is, kind of such a true thing in the US. Like, often we need to work together to solve problems instead of just being individuals making deals with the employer, right? And Right to Work sort of seizes on our deep individualism and kind of names it something great, rather than seeing that this institution actually changed things for work.
Yeah, it also encourages a kind of, and I hate to use the word, but like a kind of freeloading. Like, I'll let everyone else do all the work. They'll get the wages up, but then I won't contribute to that.
Yeah, you pay the dues, I get the benefit, right?
Exactly.
And it's all right. So it's freeloading. So we call it the Right to Freeload Act.
And the Supreme Court said that was okay, correct?
Yes. States are allowed to choose whether they're going to have a structure where people can freeload or whether union dues are consistent. And Wisconsin, over the last 10 years, the decline in our unionization is matched or exceeded only by the state of Iowa, which lost a lot of union members as well. One thing that I think about is the state of Minnesota, just the other side of the Mississippi River. Union representation actually grew over this decade.
Oh, is that
there
right?
There are more workers represented by unions today as a share of the workforce in Minnesota than in 2011. I know we all think unions only go down, but Minnesota, they went up. Also, Minnesota had really strong job growth, well in excess of Wisconsin. So that while I know this was true 2 years ago, I think it's still true. I guess I should check. While Wisconsin has more people than Minnesota, Minnesota has more workers than Wisconsin. Their job growth was so much stronger that they went from below to above us.
And the median income in Minnesota is, would you say it's substantially above Wisconsin's?
Per capita income.
Per capita. Yeah.
Is well above. I don't know the answer for median.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure it's higher. And I'm pretty sure it grew apart, but I actually don't.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to just compare. Here's two states on either side of the Mississippi River. One has had either stable or increasing union membership. One has had great decrease. And you've articulated for us what happens. If anything, the Minnesota economy is stronger than Wisconsin's. That's just a fact.
Exactly. And you think about, I mean, there's the question of unions, there's the question of minimum wages, there's the question of taxes and infrastructure. Like Minnesota has invested in their schools in ways that Wisconsin has moved away from our schools and just at the public level, the level of public investment, and invested in other infrastructure that's relevant. And that's where the base of economic strength comes from investments in shared resources, not from a race to steal, manufacturing facilities that are looking for ever lower wages.
Yeah. What's your view on the worker shortage going on? The Republican leaders in our state claim it's because of the enhanced unemployment benefits that people have decided that as long as I'm getting these benefits, I'm not going to work. And so once we take away all the benefits, people are going to go back to the retail and restaurant sector and so on. What's your view on what's going on with the labor shortage?
Well, I'm, in good news for the legislature is the federal benefit is gone now. So, if we were going to see a giant increase in workers, they'd get to see it now. But I think the evidence from other states is really thin. There's a lot of things going on in labor markets. I think the important question in many ways is labor shortage at what wage? You can't find workers at what wage?
Right.
The question is job quality.
Yeah.
And if the job quality isn't sufficient to make people feel like this keeps me safe, even as the Delta variant moves through, keeps food on my table, does this job work to sustain my life? And if workers are answering no to that, then you got to change the quality of the jobs.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. The casinos in Cripple Creek, for example, it's about 40 minutes away from us here. They're all, entry level, $12.32 an hour. Every conceivable job, it's this plus tips, plus tips, plus tips. And they're 100 jobs short at these casinos, and they're expanding, and they will be 400 jobs short by next summer if they don't change the conversation. So I just keep planting the seed. Why don't we change the conversation? Why do we have to rely on these tips? Why can't you just offer a living wage to these people? I mean, they're cleaning bathrooms, they're sweeping floors. This is not glorious work. But if you're going to only offer $12 an hour, which is, the minimum wage here, that's why you're not finding people. You bust it up to like 18, 20. Okay, I think I could deal with that for a while. So I think right now the employers actually have the upper hand in the conversation. But I don't know that they necessarily know how to approach the employers about saying, all right, well, this is great. I know you need workers, but can we barter on this wage here? You're offering 12. I think I'm worth 20. I don't know. I don't know if that conversation could even happen, but I think that's what needs to happen in order for these jobs to get filled.
This is where I'm sort of more of a neoliberal than usual, right? Like, if there's a shortage, the price of the good goes up. This is what we learned. This is what we teach. And if where I don't see prices going up, then I'm not going to call it a shortage. And I think that we've had a long-term stagnation or kind of repression of wages at the bottom of the labor market, and they need to come up.
Absolutely.
We sure do.
Absolutely.
Laura, we're just about out of time. If our listeners want to get a access to the State of Working Wisconsin report? What's the website?
So we have the pandemic kicked us all into a new way of doing things. We created a website, workingwi.org. That's where you can find the current material and all the old editions. But also I'd encourage your listeners to connect with us at cows.org or you can get to that link from workingwi.org and sign up for our newsletter and stay in touch with us that way.
Awesome.
Well, thank you so much again, Laura Dresser, for being here.
Thank you.
Very insightful. And, what your group does, as I told you before we went on air, I have found it so valuable over the years. It's just, from what I've seen in our state, it's one of the most rigorous, data-driven looks at our economy. And I wish our legislative leaders were more informed by what your organization is doing. I'm sure you wish the same thing.
Yeah, I really appreciate hearing that. Sometimes it's, you feel like you're just kind of whistling into the wind. So
Well, the work does not go unnoticed. We definitely notice.
Yeah, it does not go
Thank you.
unnoticed. Thank you again so much.
Thanks so much. Wow, Tony, another fantastic interview.
Yeah, Laura Dresser is really a brilliant scholar, and I've been looking at the State of Working Wisconsin reports for probably 20 years now. And as
Wow.
I said, they're always well-written, thoroughly researched, data-driven, exactly the kind of research that should be informing public policy.
Yeah, yeah, and it's fully available to anybody that wants to see it, right?
Right,
Yeah.
right. And I'm pretty sure every state has something equivalent, some organization doing that. And yet so many state legislatures just don't want to listen to that kind of material. They'd rather just be guided by their big donors.
Yeah. Well, it's nice to see, at least in Wisconsin, that there's a nonpartisan organization that tells it like it is from a data-driven standpoint versus, hyperbole and hypotheticals.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, so much of what they're talking about, I mean, I get so frustrated when I hear even young people say, unions are a bad thing, even though we have so much evidence that when you do have a more highly unionized workforce, your wages will go up.
Yeah.
And the overall wages of the community will go up, just as Laura had said. But I think that the anti-union forces have been very successful at demonizing unionization.
Well, and unfortunately now in the age of social media, it doesn't actually take an article. It just takes a title and a click to pass on stuff like that without people diving into the substance. So if people actually researched it and looked at the numbers, they would see that these anti-union people are a little bit off base. Not to say that they're bad people, but they're misinformed by probably false information.
Yeah. I mean, there have been obviously corrupt union leaders over the years.
Oh, yeah.
I think one thing that has hurt unions is that they're often run from the top down, which is a bad thing. I mean, by definition, a union should be bottom up.
Right.
So the leadership of unions don't always help themselves. Right. But having said that, and I have this conversation with students all the time, it's fine if you're opposed to collective bargaining and any kind of unionization, but what are you proposing instead?
Right.
Are you basically saying that you as an individual are going to be able to get, security, decent wages just from your own personal negotiating power? I mean, we have so much evidence that it doesn't work that way, correct?
Yeah. I mean, people can give it a try, but it's probably not going to work.
No, exactly. So yeah, we should try and get, other people with economic views on our show. And it's fascinating. And until we do that, obviously, we hope everyone stays elevated. Stay elevated, everybody. We'll see you next time.
You're running on empty with Matt and Tony.